The last person on earth I expected to call me was my ex-wife's little sister. But there was Joe Merritt's name lighting up my phone at 6 in the morning, 7 years of silence deep. And when I picked up, all she said was, "Cal, it's Joe. I need your hands." I run fence and shoe horses for a living, so people needing my hands is not itself remarkable. What was remarkable was the caller. When Elise and I split up 7 years ago, the Merritt family closed around her like a gate. And Joe, 22 at our wedding, funny and horse crazy and the only Merritt who ever laughed at my jokes, went silent along with the rest of them. Not a card, not a nod across the feed store. 7 years. "Storm took down my north fence," she said, like we'd spoken Tuesday. "Big cottonwood, 4 sections, and I've got horses that think a downed rail is a suggestion. I'll pay double. Come today." There are men who would have asked, why him? Why now? What's the catch? I'd love to tell you I was one of them. Instead, I looked at the coffee I hadn't poured yet and heard myself say, "Gate code still your birthday?" A pause, and inside the pause, something I couldn't name yet. "Yeah," Joe said, quieter. "Some things I kept." Her place sits 11 miles out. 40 acres, a boarding barn, the kind of fences that tell you the owner does it right, and the storm had done exactly what she said. Dropped 60 feet of cottonwood across the north paddock, like God's own argument. We worked most of the day without talking about the 7 years, because there was chainsaw work and post work, and a paint pony named Biscuit supervising us through the gap with strong opinions. And because some conversations need a fence between the people having them. Joe worked like she always had. No wasted motion. No patience for wasted motion in others. And every so often I'd catch her watching me with an expression I kept misfiling as guilt about the silence. It wasn't that. I know that now. Around 3, with a new post set and the rails going up, she pulled her gloves off, looked at the sun like she was checking a deadline only she could see, and said it. Quiet, like stepping off a ledge she'd been standing on for a long time. "Cal, there's someone I want you to meet." The someone came out of the barn at a dead run with hay in her hair, 6 years old and made entirely of elbows and certainty, hollering, "Aunt J.O." Biscuit untied himself again. He has opinions. And then she saw me and pulled up short and looked me over the frank way kids and horse traders do. "Who's this?" "This is Cal," Joe said. Her voice had gone careful. "He's fixing the fence." "Hi, I'm Maisie." She stuck out a small left hand, shook mine once, businesslike, and got straight to the important matters. "Do you have a horse?" "Not right now." She frowned like I'd confessed to not having lungs. "Everyone has one," she informed me. "They just haven't met it." And with that settled, she was gone again, back to renegotiate with Biscuit. Humming as she went, 3 notes, over and over. The way I hum when my hands are busy. The habit Elise spent 9 years telling me was going to drive her to an early grave. I watched her brush that pony down. I watched her switch the brush to her left hand, plant her feet the way I plant mine, blow her hair out of her eyes with a sideways puff. And I stood there with a fence rail going heavier and heavier in my arms, while something enormous circled me, close enough to feel the wind off it. Joe was watching me watch her. She'd stopped pretending to work. "How old is she, Joe?" "She turned 6 in March. 6 years. I did the arithmetic every man in my boots would do, and then I did it again slower, and the rail slipped out of my hands into the grass, and I didn't pick it up." "Elise was 8 weeks along when she left you," Joe said. She said it steady, and her eyes were wet, and her chin never moved an inch. "Maisie's yours, Cal. She's been yours every single day for 6 years. A breath, and I am done, keeping her a secret." Across the paddock, my daughter told a paint pony that his behavior reflected poorly on the whole barn. The 3 notes floated back to us on the wind. Joe took a step closer and said the rest of it, the part she'd rehearsed, the part the fence had been for. Look at her again. I looked. God help me. I'd been looking all afternoon. She had my mother's squint against the sun. She had my cowlick, the double crown my old man called a two-storm head. She held a brush, like I hold a rasp. Why now? I finally got out. 7 years, Joe. Why today? And Joe Merritt's face, which had carried this thing alone for reasons I didn't know yet, went from grief to something harder. Something with a target. Because 3 weeks ago, she said, the man whose name is on her birth certificate filed for full custody of her. And Cal, he knows she isn't his. He's always known. He wants her anyway. I made it to my truck. I want that on the record. I got to the truck, and I sat with both hands on the wheel, and I looked at the 8-year chip hanging off my key ring, and I breathed the way Denny taught me, until the roaring got quiet enough to think through. Then I went back to the fence, because that's the whole program, really. You go back to the fence. Joe laid it out on her tailgate like a foreman, a printout from the county docket, still warm from the library printer. In Re the Marriage of Renner. Elise was divorcing Chase Renner. Yes, that Renner Automotive, the face on 4 billboards between here and the interstate. Family is the guarantee in letters taller than me. The man she'd left me for while I was busy losing my daddy's place and finding the bottom of a bottle. And attached to the divorce, filed 3 weeks back, Chase's petition for primary residential custody of the minor child, MR, age 6. His grounds ran 2 pages. Elise's instability. Elise's erratic relocation of the child. Elise's unvetted associations. A man building a cage out of legal paper, bar by bar. He's her legal father, Joe said. Married to Elise when she was born, name on the certificate, 6 years of Christmas cards with all 3 of them in matching sweaters. On paper, Cal, he's bulletproof. And he doesn't want her. Her jaw worked. You understand what I'm telling you? Elise finally left him, and this is the bill. He can't lose the election year family and the wife in the same season, so he's keeping the family. Maisie's not his daughter in that filing. She's collateral. Does Elise know you called me? Joe's silence answered before she did. Elise stopped speaking to me 11 days ago, she said, when I told her that if she didn't tell you, I would. So, no, you're looking at the only Merritt currently willing to commit the truth. She tried to smile and didn't make it. The fence is real, Cal. It's also an excuse. I've had your number pulled up for 3 weeks. That's when the phone rang. Not mine. Not Joe's. A tinny little chirp from the porch rail, from a small pink flip phone sitting next to a juice box. Maisie's phone. Because Chase Renner had given a 6-year-old her own phone to stay close, princess. And Maisie trotted over and answered it the way kids answer things they've been drilled on. Shoulders coming up around her ears, and said, "Hi, Daddy, yes, sir. We're at Aunt Joe's." A pause. Her eyes came up. To me, then dropped. "Just Aunt Joe," she said. And the fence man. When she'd hung up and run back to the barn, the little phone buzzed once more on the rail. A text this time, previewed right there on the screen, and Joe turned it so I could read it, and the evening got 10 degrees colder. Dad, ask Aunt Joe to tell her visitor the fence better be all he's fixing. 6 years old. He'd put a leash on her with a screen on the end of it, and he'd just given it a tug so we could both feel where it led. "Okay," I said, and my voice came out level, which surprised us both. "Who's your lawyer? And how early does he wake up?" Harmon Price has been practicing law in this county since before the interstate, out of an office that smells like pipe tobacco and torts. And he knew my daddy, which around here is a credential. He listened to the whole tangle with his boots on his desk and his eyes shut, and when we finished, he opened them and said the sentence I'd repeat to myself for the next 2 weeks. "Paper beats blood," Harmon said. Right up until Blood files paperwork. Then he built the map on his chalkboard. An actual chalkboard, like a man diagramming a cattle sale. Here's your hill, son. Renner's the presumed father, married to the mother at birth, name on the certificate. That presumption is the oldest wall in family law. You can knock it down, you file a paternity action, you get court-ordered genetic testing. The numbers do the talking. But the chalk tapped. Testing a minor needs the mother's consent or a judge's order. The judge route takes motions, and motions take weeks, and you don't have weeks. Because he flipped the docket printout temporary custody hearing on the 14th. 9 days. If Renner walks out of that hearing with temporary primary custody, you'll spend 2 years and your truck digging him back out of it. Because courts hate moving a child twice. So the whole war comes down to one door, and your ex-wife is standing in front of it. Elise consents to the swab. We're expedited and armed inside a week. She doesn't. He set the chalk down. We're throwing rocks at a bank vault. She won't take Joe's calls, I said. Then somebody she will take, Harmon said. Had better find her fast. The counterfire started before we even got out of his parking lot. Joe's phone first. An email from Renner's counsel, 4 paragraphs of silk around a fist, advising her that facilitating contact between the minor child and unrelated adult males during the mother's custodial time would be documented and presented at the hearing. Meaning every hour Maisie spent at that farm with me on it was being sharpened into a knife to stick in Elise. And by Friday, the quieter knife, 2 boarding clients gave Joe notice in the same week. Both of them polite, both of them vague, both of them, Joe checked, financing their trucks and trailers through Renner Automotive. Nobody threatened anything. Nobody had to. That's what money like his does. It doesn't knock, it just leans on the whole house at once. He's squeezing my barn to get to my sister to get to your daughter, Joe said, reading the second notice in the tack room. And then she looked up at me with the Merritt jaw set at its fighting angle. I want it noted that I have never liked that man. 6 Christmases in matching sweaters, Cal. I have earned this fight. We finished the north fence that weekend because horses don't care about your subpoenas, and it was there, me on the post-hole digger, her on the level, that I finally asked the question that had been sitting between us like a third worker. How long, Joe? I didn't dress it up. How long have you known she was mine? The level didn't move. Her voice, when it came, was the voice of somebody who'd been waiting for the question for 6 years and still wasn't ready. Since the delivery room. She made herself look at me. I was there when she was born, Cal, Elise's hand in mine. And they put that baby up on her chest, and she had that ridiculous double colic, and I did the math I'd been refusing to do since the baby shower. And Elise saw me do it. She saw my face do it. And that night, in the hallway of the maternity ward, my sister told me the truth, and then she told me the price of it. Joe's knuckles were white on the level. Chase knew before the wedding. Elise told him because she's a coward, but she's not a liar. And he married her anyway, on terms. The baby would be a Renner. Born a Renner. Raised a Renner. Certificate. Church Christmas card. That was the deal. And if I so much as breathed your name, her voice cracked and she hammered it flat, Elise swore I'd never see that little girl again. Not birthdays. Not ever. So I chose Cal. I chose watching over telling. I told myself I was staying close to protect her. I told myself I'd tell you when it was safe. It was never safe. And a month ago I watched that man file paperwork to take her like a repossessed truck, and I realized the person I'd actually been protecting for 6 years was me from this conversation. She set the level down on the rail, very carefully, like it might go off. You got 6 years of her second hand because I was scared. I know what I took. I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm asking you to let me help fix the fence. I'm not going to pretty up what I did next. because this channel is where I tell the truth. I walked down the fence line, out past the cottonwood stump, and I stood at the corner post in the falling dark, with 6 birthdays going off in my chest like dry lightning. First steps I didn't see. A first word that wasn't to me. 6 years of some other man teaching my daughter to answer the phone, yes, sir. And I did the oldest math there is. Who do I get to be angry at, and what does it cost the kid? It was full dark when I walked back. Jo was still there. She hadn't moved 10 feet, and she'd cried exactly as much as she'd decided to, and not one tear more, which is the most Merritt thing I can tell you about her. I picked the post-hole digger back up. Fence isn't finished, I said. And that was the whole conversation, and it was enough. And we both knew what had just been decided at that corner post, and it was bigger than lumber. Her phone buzzed while we loaded tools. Unknown number, but the voice of it came through in text as clear as if he'd been leaning on the tailgate. Unknown. Heard the boarding business is down a couple stalls. Jo, tough market. Renner Automotive has always valued its loyal partners. Be ashamed to stop being one. Into evidence? Jo said, screenshotting before I answered. Into evidence, I said. He narrates. Harmon's going to love him, and as I pulled out of her gate that night, my headlights swept the county road and caught it for the first time. A white Tahoe, parked on the shoulder a quarter-mile down where no house is. Lights off. Engine running. It didn't move when I passed. It didn't have to. I drove home the long way, wrote down the plate at a stop sign with my heart going like a shoeing hammer, and understood that we were now officially interesting to a man who pays people to sit in the dark. Elise came to the farm on Tuesday, and she came in hot, gravel flying, door slamming, sunglasses at 6 p.m., and for a second, watching my ex-wife stride across the yard I was standing in, 7 years folded up like no time at all. You had no right, she started, at Jo. And then she saw me straight on, and the script went out of her. Up close, she didn't look like a Renner billboard. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept since she'd filed for divorce and had just started understanding what she'd filed against. It all came out on Jo's porch over the next hour, in pieces, in the wrong order, the way the truth actually travels. Why she was finally leaving him. Not one thing, she said. Everything. But mostly Maisie, the phone he'd given her that Elise wasn't allowed to take away. The campaign photos, hair coached, smile coached, stand by daddy, princess, the pony privileges, revoked as discipline for talking too much about Aunt Jo's. He never raises his voice, Elise said, staring at the paddock. He adjusts terms. You don't know what he does to people who cost him. I've watched him do it to contractors, to a county commissioner, to his own brother. And now I cost him. She laughed. One broken note. So he's taking the one asset I can't survive losing. Then open the one door that stops him, I said. Consent to the test, Elise, 9 days. Harmon has the lab on standby. And my ex-wife, and I want you to hear this the way I heard it. Not as a villain, but as a person who'd been living inside a wall so long she'd forgotten which side she built it from, pulled out her phone, opened a text thread, and turned it around. So we could see exactly what stood behind that door. Chase, leave if you want. She stays. She's mine on paper, and paper is all a judge reads. Push the biology thing, and I'll walk them through every signature you ever put on that certificate. Every form, every lie. Fraud has your handwriting on it, sweetheart. Not mine. You'll lose her to me, or you'll lose her to your own record. Pick, that's what consent costs, Elise said, dead quiet. He's not bluffing, Cal. He doesn't bluff. He files. She stood up, armor going back on plate by plate. I'm sorry. For all of it. More than there are words for. But I can't hand him the knife. She was gravel and taillights before either of us found an argument, and Jo and I sat on that porch in the dark with 8 days left and the one door locked from the inside. What unlocked the door was 6 years old and came bearing a drawing. Maisie landed back at the farm Thursday after a Renner weekend gone long, and anybody with eyes could see the weather on her. Quiet, careful, the hum switched off. She did her barn chores like a kid taking a test, and when Joe asked the gentle questions aunts know how to ask, it came out in that terrible matter-of-fact voice kids use for the things that scare them most. Daddy said if she kept talking about Aunt Joe's farm so much, Biscuit was going to be sold to a family that appreciates him. She'd been carrying it for 3 days. She confided, been extra quiet so Biscuit could stay. I was half a breath from driving to a dealership and committing several felonies when she came and found me at the fence, where I was pretending to check posts that didn't need checking, and held up a folded piece of paper with the ceremony of a land deed. I made this for you, because you don't have a horse. She watched me unfold it. Crayon. A big rangy gelding, brown with a white blaze, standing at a fence that was recognizably ours. Hers and mine, the north fence, drawn true down to the corner post. Under it, in brand new first-grade letters, she'd written his name. Chance, that's your horse, Maisie explained, patient with me. You just hadn't met him yet. I named him for you because naming's my job. She looked up at me, squinting into the sun with my mother's whole face, and added, you can keep it. I signed it. I have been bucked off, kicked, bitten, and divorced, and nothing in 50 years of getting knocked down has hit me like a crayon horse named Chance. I got down on my heels so we were eye to eye, and I thanked her like she'd handed me the deed she thought she had. Because she had. Elise came for pickup an hour later, and it was Elise, thank God, who found it. Buckling Maisie in, taking the pink phone to silence it for the drive, she did the thing Chase never imagined she'd have the nerve to do. She looked at it. Really looked. Settings, storage. The app's a 6-year-old's phone has no reason to carry. And there it was, dressed as a system utility, logged into an account with her husband's recovery email. Location sharing, call logs, ambient audio. The phone he insisted their daughter carry everywhere. Into Elise's apartment, into her kitchen, into every room where a frightened woman had been calling lawyers and crying to her sister. Had been a wiretap with a cartoon case. She came back up Joe's driveway at midnight. No sunglasses this time. The phone was in a zip-top bag, held out at arm's length like a snake. He bugged my daughter, Elise said. Her voice had burned all the way down to the load-bearing steel. He put a wire on a 6-year-old to spy on me, and he's been listening to her bedtime. And I sat there tonight, understanding that I have spent 6 years teaching her that this is what a father is. She set the bag on the porch rail. Between us. I'll sign the consent. Tonight, I'll sign the affidavit. I'll sit in the front row. I'll say every word under oath and let his lawyers do their worst to me. I have earned some of their worst. But first, and she reached into her coat and laid a printed photograph on top of the bag, you should have this. I've been carrying it for 5 years, too afraid to use it. His office, safe. I photographed it the year Maisie turned 1. It was a lab report. A private paternity test, ordered by Chase Renner on a cheek swab he'd taken from his own toddler under cover of a dentist visit. Probability of paternity, 0. Dated 5 years ago. Filed by him, kept by him, known by him, in black and white, in his own records. Every single day he'd played father on a billboard. He's known since she was 1, Elise said. He kept the receipt. Joe let out a long breath and looked at me across the porch rail, and for the first time since a phone call at 6 in the morning. The math was on our side. Harmon wakes up at 5, I said. Let's not make him wait. The next 5 days ran like a branding, loud, fast, and precise, everybody knowing their station. Friday morning, Harmon filed the works, my paternity petition, The motion for expedited genetic testing with Elise's notarized consent stapled to it, and her affidavit, which she wrote at Joe's kitchen table in one sitting, unflinching. Signing her own mistakes, in the same steady hand, she signed the truth. The swab happened that afternoon at the lab in town. Maisie was told it was a cheek race, which she won, obviously, and demanded a rematch. And I stood in that little fluorescent room watching a technician seal an envelope that held the answer I already knew, and my hands, which do not shake on a rank colt, shook. We told her the truth that Sunday, because the counselor Harmon sent us to said kids can carry true things better than they carry strange weather, and because Maisie had already begun to notice the weather. Elise and I did it together, on Joe's porch steps, in the smallest words the truth would fit in, that families come with papers, like horses do, and that her papers had been written wrong a long time ago, before she could talk, and that fixing them meant she'd learned something big, that I was her father, the first one, the blood one, and that nobody was going anywhere she didn't want them. Maisie listened with her whole face, the way she checks a rail. She looked at her mother for a long moment. She looked at me for a longer one, and then she nodded, once, and filed it the only way she files anything. "Okay," she said. "So you're my Cal." She tried it out loud again, testing the fit. My Cal. Satisfied, she hopped off the step, then stopped, turned, and issued the ruling that held our whole family together like a top rail. "You should have said something sooner. I named you a horse weeks ago." And she went off to inform Biscuit, and Elise put her face in her hands and laughed and cried at the same time, and I sat on those steps being somebody's Cal, which remains the finest thing I have ever been called, right up until November. Chase answered the way men like him answer. By Monday, the white Tahoe had moved from Joe's county road to the curb across from my shop, unsubtle on purpose. And by Tuesday, his counsel's letter reached Harmon offering an amicable resolution, $50,000, my petition withdrawn, a confidentiality agreement, and, in the paragraph that told us everything, a preview of the alternative. My Dewey, 8 years back, my bankruptcy from when the farm went, and the sentence that made even Harmon go quiet, a reference to Mr. Boone's Thursday evening commitments at the Methodist church basement, which meant the Tahoe had followed me to my home group, which meant Chase Renner's investigator had sat outside an meeting taking notes for a rich man's leverage file. I read that letter twice. Then I told Harmon to get out a legal pad, and I gave him all of it myself. The drinking years, the Dewey, the bankruptcy, the 8-year chip, Denny's number, the whole ledger, straight into my own declaration, filed by us first. Say it before they can spend it, I said. It's my history. He doesn't get to own the telling. Harmon looked at me a long second, and then he smiled around his pipe like an old wolf. "Son," he said, "you'd have made a hell of a lawyer if you weren't so honest." The last wobble, I'll admit, was mine, the night before the results, at the fence, when the fear finally found the soft place. 6 years, Joe. She's got a whole life. What if the kindest thing a stranger can do is stay one? And Joe Merritt took my face in her 2 rope-burned hands, first time she ever touched me on purpose, and set me straight the way she sets a post. "You've been her father for 6 years without knowing it," she said. "She's been your daughter for 6 years without knowing it. The only person who knew everything, every day, for 5 years, in writing, and chose cruelty anyway, is sitting in a glass office under his own billboard. Don't you dare hand that man your seat." The results landed Wednesday at 4:12 p.m. Probability of paternity 99.9998%, which Harmon read aloud and then said, "Dry as August. Congratulations, it's a girl." And Thursday morning at 8, one day ahead of the hearing neither side wanted, we sat down across a mediation table from Chase Renner, because his lawyers had requested it the hour our filings hit the docket. Men whose faces are on billboards do not do public hearings they might lose. Family is the guarantee does not survive cross-examination. He came in the way he does everything, tan, unhurried, shaking the mediator's hand like he was sponsoring her, and he opened with the voice he uses in the commercials. Cal. Good to finally meet the fence man. A smile with financing available. Let's keep this simple. Everybody walks away whole. Simple works, Harmon said, and nodded at me, and I dealt the folder onto that polished table 1 page at a time, the way Joe taught me to lay rails. In order, snug, no gaps. Dina results, court certified, yesterday, she's mine, to the 4th decimal. Snap. Your lab report, the one you ordered on a 1-year-old with a cheek swab from a dentist visit, 0% dated 5 years back, from your own safe. You've known longer than she's known her colors. Snap. Your texts to Elise. She's mine on paper, and paper is all a judge reads. You put your whole strategy in writing, Chase. You always did like your name on things. Snap. The forensic report on the phone you gave a 6-year-old. Location. Call logs. Ambient audio. Running in her bedroom. Logged to your recovery email. There are 2 agencies that get very interested in that one. And neither of them cares who's on your billboards. Snap. Your investigator's parking habits outside a church basement. And your counsel's letter offering me $50,000 to unbecome her father. I squared the stack. Here's the simple, since you like it. You withdraw the custody claim this morning. You consent to the paternity adjudication and the amended certificate. You sign the stipulation giving Elise residential custody with my rights established. And you resolve the divorce like a man who wants his name kept out of things. Or tomorrow morning, all of this gets read out loud in a public courtroom, on the record, with the press row full, and every family in this county that ever believed a Renner guarantee gets to hear what one's worth. The room held still. The mediator had stopped writing 2 exhibits ago. Renner's lead counsel made the one play left on the board. Those communications between spouses are privileged, and that report was obtained from a private, and Harmon, who had been waiting his whole career for this exact sentence, took his pipe out of his breast pocket, looked at it fondly, and put it back. Counselor, he said, your client texted his custody strategy to the opposing party, ran covert genetic testing on a minor, and installed audio surveillance in a 6-year-old's bedroom. You go right ahead and stand up in a public courtroom tomorrow and argue privilege. I'll sell tickets. And Chase Renner looked at the paper. His whole life's religion. Paper. And I watched him understand that for the first time ever, all of it was pointed at him. So he spent his last coin the only direction he had left. He leaned back, looked me over, boots to brim, and said, soft for the whole room, you're a horseshoe salesman with a record boon. Give her 10 years. She'll be embarrassed to be seen with you. I didn't raise my voice. Turns out you don't need to when it's true. You had a daughter who wasn't yours, and you made her a hostage, I said. I had a daughter I never knew, and I came running. Take that to a judge, Chase. Ask him which one's a father. It was Elise who finished it. She'd been quiet at the end of the table the whole session, sitting straighter than I'd seen her in 7 years, and now she slid the stipulation across to her husband with one finger and said, in the pleasantest voice a person ever loaded like a shotgun, paper's all a judge reads, sweetheart, read ours. He signed, all of it, that morning, jaw tight. Pen loud, the custody claim died before lunch. The divorce settled quiet within the month, which cost him. Elise's lawyer saw to that. And 3 weeks later, the ledger ran 2 column inches, announcing Chase Renner was withdrawing from the commissioner's race to focus on family. Joe laminated it. It hangs in the tack room, and no, I will not be taking it down. The amended birth certificate came in a county envelope on a Tuesday in October. Father, Calvin James Boone. And I stood at my mailbox holding 6 years of missed birthdays gone suddenly, officially, forever unmissable from here on out, and I'll tell you exactly what I did. I drove to the farm, and I showed my daughter, and my daughter read it very seriously, and then asked if this meant she could name my truck. She could. It's Bartholomew Steve. Don't ask. Naming's her job. We never pushed the other name. Harmon advised patience, the counselor advised patience, and Maisie, who does everything in her own order, took until the first cold Saturday in November up at the north fence, where I was showing her how to check a rail, and she was checking it with her left hand, and her tongue out exactly like her old man. She finished the rail. She nodded at her own work, and then, without looking up, easy as breathing, hold the level, Dad. I'll check the next one. I held the level. I'd have held up the sky. Down the fence line, Joe turned away and had something in her eye for a while. And Biscuit, a gentleman for once, said nothing. The rescue came home in December, big rangy gelding, brown, white blaze, gentle as a porch swing, and if you think I didn't drive 4 counties to find a horse that matched a crayon drawing, you have not been paying attention to what kind of story this is. Maisie walked up to him with the drawing in her hand, checked him against it like a bank teller checking a signature, and pronounced him correct. Chance, she told him. You're late. His papers hang in the tack room next to a laminated newspaper clipping and a crayon original, signed by the artist. And Elise and Joe, that took longer, as it should have. 2 sisters rebuilding a bridge they'd both burned ends of, but it's being built. Elise comes to the farm now on her weekends and drinks coffee on the porch and watches her daughter be loud and unmonitored and 6. And one evening she stopped next to me at the rail and said, quietly, "You were always going to be good at this." That's the part I couldn't afford to know. Then, she went and held a lead rope for her kid, and I let that be what it was. Which leaves the fence. The north fence, the one a storm knocked down and a phone call raised, and one evening at the end of it all, gold light, chores done. Maisie up at the house naming things, Joe and I ended up at the corner post where I'd once walked off into the dark and walked back. She had her boot on the bottom rail. She was quiet a long time, for a merit. Cal, A, B. The 3 notes drifting down from the porch, my mother's hum and my daughter's mouth. It was never about the fence, so I kissed my ex-wife's little sister at the corner post of the straightest fence in the county. 7 years of silence, 6 years of secrets, and 1 crayon horse after the morning she called, and from the porch came the delighted holler of upper management, already reaching for a name for us. Because naming's her job, and honestly, whatever she picks, we'll answer to it. So now it's your turn, and I want it straight, no varnish. If that phone rang at 6 in the morning, 7 years of silence on the line, and all she said was, "I need your hands. Come today," would you have gotten in the truck? And here's the one I really want in the comments. What's the truth somebody kept from you, for your own good, and when it finally reached you, was it too late, or did it come, like mine did, right on time? Tell me the story. I read every single comment, and I know for a fact half of you are carrying a secret in one direction or the other. Set it down here. If this story got to you the way a crayon horse got to me, subscribe. Because next week's story starts with a returned wedding dress and the receipt somebody left hiding in the box.